Good morning, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome back to campus. Let us pray. God, we are grateful for another day that you have given to us and for a chance to learn more about this place that you have given to our care at St. Paul's. Thank you for all of the parents and friends and grandparents who love these students, and thank you for the teachers and staff who do so too. Continue to watch over us, protect us, and guide us, that all that we do and are might make your love known to the world. Pray this in the name of Jesus our Lord. Amen. Mr. Milo.
Yes, thank you.
He has a song and dance prepared for you, just so you know.
Exactly. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. This seems way too formal for the setting and what we're doing. I don't even really like the name of the slides, but that's really kind of what we're doing. And I have not seen this in like a decade, so that's kind of fun. All right, so here's what we're going to do today. Would you mind moving to the next slide? I always like to start with our mission and remind people what it is we're here to accomplish and what we're trying to do as a school. So you've heard me say this probably at programs. We talk a lot about it internally, that we're trying to develop confident learners, ethical leaders, and compassionate, engaged citizens. So for us, that means these are the areas we're looking at when we're talking about programs, thinking about what we do. Are we impacting one of these areas of our mission? Okay. Good. So today what we're going to do, and the division heads are here to help me, we're going to take you through a current snapshot, just what's going on in the school now, which most of you are hyper aware of. Talk a little bit about the strategic plan we've been working on really for about a year. We've already made some progress on it, but we're officially releasing it today. And then something else you might have heard about, we're in the final process of what's called our Isaacs accreditation process. As an independent school, we have a different accreditation group. It's not the state, it's a regional group. Our region is Isaac, which is based out of Chicago. So Ms. Hood is leading that process for us internally, so she'll be talking about that. So current snapshot, strategic plan areas, and then Isaac's, what we're going to cover today. All right, so y'all probably already know this, but just a little bit of an enrollment trend. 22-23, we were at 503. 49, 23, 24. As of right now, we're projecting to be 491 to 495, which is excellent for us. So we definitely saw a bump, during the pandemic, and we've kept most of that bump. So since I've been here, this is my 10th year, we've been as low as 440, and then 503 was an all-time high. So the interesting thing about that for us is our staffing model doesn't really change. Really, if you're talking about from like 450 up to about 500. So we're mostly full depending on the grade levels, again, as you all know, and so this is a good size for us. The research also shows that 500 is a really good size for schools. In a school with 500 kids, students are well known, we all obviously know each other, so that's actually considered a really good safety protocol and community building protocol for schools. A lot of people don't know this. I've told our city council people this, that we have 46 kids represented at the school. Obviously, some of them are bigger than others, but we do draw people from all over the metro. So that is our current enrollment. This is something we don't talk about very often, and I haven't done this before in the State of the School address, but I think it's helpful sometimes just to kind of review like a little finance 101 at St. Paul's, like basically where the money comes from. You'll all pay tuition, so you know that that's a big part of it, so thank you. It's our biggest tuition driver. Revenue driver. The other areas we get money from, like our summer programs, after school programs, enrichments, athletics, lunch. So all of those contribute to our overall revenue. Our annual fund is a huge revenue driver for us. We also do what's called an endowment draw. So we do have an endowment at the school, and every quarter we draw 4% off of that endowment into our operating budget. Our goal is for that to have a 7% return. We have a pretty sophisticated investment policy statement, so obviously it depends on the market and what's going on. Sometimes we will not take the draw, depending on our operational needs and what's going on. But typically we do that, and then we're about to have the auction year coming up, and the Parents Guild contribution every year kind of fills out our coffers. So that's where the money comes from, and those are the 5 biggest areas. So you also may not know how our budget works, so I'll talk about that a little bit. It's really challenging actually for us to make a budget because we have to do it almost a year in advance. So we'll start making the budget for 25-6 when we get back in the fall. And we have to do it based on our predicted enrollment number. So we're always kind of guessing what that number will be. We look at trends and we can get pretty close. So like right now for next year, our budgeted number is 491. So we're confident about that number. If it comes in lower, not great. If it comes in higher, great. So our big drivers of our budget, faculty and staff salaries are the #1 expense at the school, as you would imagine. And so that's the biggest thing we spend money on, and rightfully so. The other things we look at are programs. It could be everything from the milkman driving, which could be everything from tools for the classroom, to kindergarten supplies, to art supplies. And basically what happens is we roll the budget every year, maybe like you do at home, and we start off with a 3% kind of increase of the budget. That's the status quo. So if we have a 3% tuition increase, that means basically we're just turning the page. So when we have like a 4 or 4.5% tuition increase, that point is where programmatic growth comes from, or staffing. So I think that's something that people may not realize, that 3% basically just gets us what we had this year. Anything beyond that, it requires more of a tuition increase. We've been pretty much averaging between 3.5 to 4.5%. That's kind of been our range. And I think if you've been here in the last 10 years, you can see directly where that money has gone and what we're spending it on. So the other thing that happens, and y'all see it, you're sitting in one right now. So our kind of capital improvements, how we've done that. Recently, a lot of it has again been through the auction and fund division. If you think about the last few years, we were able to do this space, we were able to do the gym. We would not have been able to do the playgrounds without the fund division. Is that from in there? Awesome. Little musical interlude. Without that, the other thing is that we'll have individuals who give major gifts to support these projects. And then when we have a big project, so if you've been here, again, as long as I have now, when we renovated the South Building, that took a bigger community effort and a capital campaign. And then we also do some things that you may not be aware of. We also have a reserve fund. So we keep 15 to 20% of our operating revenue in a reserve fund, and then we use that fund for things that are not very fun. So like tuck pointing the wall that faces Main Street, which is outrageously expensive. We did that 2 summers ago. You might have put into a wider parking space this morning last year. It's reserve funds. Our roof that's 30 years old on the South Building this summer, that will come from reserve funds. As we're sitting here, Officer Seals is in the back. 3M film on the windows, reserve fund. Our strategic system that we have, that we've added for security. All that comes from the reserve fund. So these areas are actually really not from tuition. And I think sometimes parents don't realize that or don't understand that. So the folks who were here before and kind of helped create some of these funds have done a really good job of allowing us to keep the campus in great shape. All right, so before we move on to this, we're going to pass it to her to give a current snapshot. Just want to say, did anybody have any questions at all about kind of the current financial state of the school? It's really something we don't talk about very often. We are really blessed that historically the board and our finance team has done a really good job of operating the school. We do not carry any debt. So we're not a school, like if we do a project, we have to have the money. So a lot of schools will go into debt for those kind of things. So operationally, we are really sound. Like one of our ISIS accreditation teams comes in the fall, and I've been on these teams, led one last year, like they will be somewhat jealous of our financial stability. So it's really strong. That doesn't mean we don't need to continue to raise money and do those kind of things. It just means the foundation is really strong that we rest on. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
What's the annual operating budget?
So we are right around $8 million. And again, that includes any like tuition discounts for remission and all of those types of things. So and we try to run a balanced budget. If we have any surplus at the end of the year, then that rolls into this reserve fund. And that's kind of where that goes. And so we have been able to see some surpluses. And a lot of that, again, was based on unexpected enrollment or based on outperformance in the annual fund or outperformance with the auction. Like last year, we had an outlier annual fund, which was awesome. So we're able to take that money and apply it to a roof.
And the size of the endowment right now?
So the endowment, the way we have to do it from an auditing standpoint is we combine this reserve fund and the other fund. So it's about.
Is it an invested reserve?
It is.
Okay.
So both of those funds are invested the same way. So we have moved away actually from active management in the last year. So we had benchmarks, and consistently I would say we were not hitting the benchmark that we wanted to hit. So a lot of that we felt like was due to active management, and the fees did not justify active management. So kind of like you all, I mean, it's kind of the same thing, like Vanguard funds are cheaper, Fidelity funds are cheaper, so why would we pay an extra premium if we're not seeing the return? But yeah, that's driven by our investment policy statement that comes from the board and is reviewed. Send it off. But they are now invested the same way. So between the two of those is, depending on the day, it's about $6 million, which is good for, again, for a store our size. I always tell people I'd like to see it be about $15 million. We'll get there. All right, Ms. Soder, any other questions? Yes, sorry.
How do you benchmark tuition?
How do we benchmark tuition? So that's a good question. So I think we do a couple of things. Obviously, we look at our local market, and I would say since I've been here historically, you know, who we consider our competitors to be, I would argue we're a value in that area. So we do look at what other schools are doing. Also, in full transparency, we look at our feeder schools and where kids go to make sure we're not getting too far away from those. So for us, that's some of the Catholic high schools. And then, you know, we'll look at kind of other regional trends. It's hard to compare us to other schools outside the region. So for example, the last time the accreditation team was here 7 years ago, one of the recommendations is that we take a look at tuition, meaning that we raise it. Because they were coming from a lot of different markets. And if you drop this school in Chicago, or DC, or Atlanta, or whatever, you're going to see you get 2x the cost. So we try to be mindful of it. I think really what we do with the tuition and tuition increases is try to say, hey, look, here are the things we're trying to do over the next three years, and how can we impact that and try to keep it, you know, with that tuition. We do look at it and we talk about it. Look at all of those schools. That's a good question. Any other questions? Ms. Ho, do you want to talk about community feedback?
I'd love to. Thank you.
Ms. Ho made this beautiful infographic herself.
I made another infographic that's on the next slide. Andrew did a great job of covering the financial and admission snapshot. I'm here to tell you a little bit about the community satisfaction snapshot. One of the ways that we gather this data, as Andrew mentioned, is through our accreditation process. Our ISACS accreditation process is something we'll talk about a little bit more at the end of this, but it's a cyclical process that runs over 7 years. And the first part of that process is gathering community data or constituent data from parents, from faculty and staff, and from students. In our case, we only pull 5th through 8th grade, which is the recommendation from ISACS. We also got really lucky, depending on how you look at it, because COVID threw the schedule off for ISACS, so we were actually able to collect data 2 years in a row, which is not typically what a school would do, but we had collected data in 2022 in preparation for our self-study process, and then realized that we were going to be starting our self-study process a year later than we originally thought, and wanted to make sure that our data was up to date. So you might remember taking this survey in October, but we're fortunate to also have data from 2022 as well. And what that allowed us to do is go ahead and identify some opportunities for growth as we prepare for this accreditation cycle and as we prepare for this new strategic plan, and then be able to actually see some metrics on how we were doing. But for the most recent survey, generally speaking, the data came back really, really strong. And I think that's a really heartening thing to take away from this survey. Generally speaking, the way that Isaacs measures the data is through a Likert scale, and then community members essentially, whenever they rate something as excellent or very good, that goes into a pool that is then compared to the Isaacs benchmark. And so the report that we get back lets us know how our very goods and excellence stack up against all of the other very goods and excellence in the same category for other schools in Isaacs, in our independent school community. And across the board, for all of our areas, academic and other programmatic areas, generally speaking, we met or exceeded the Isaacs benchmarks. We'll talk in a moment about some of the areas for growth where we maybe didn't quite meet that mark, but generally speaking, the mission is well known and endorsed by our school community. There's a really strong sense that St. Paul's is a great quality of education, and there's a high satisfaction with academic services, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on that in the next slide. I think some of the biggest takeaways for us, 97% of our community members, as I stated, felt like the school's mission, or felt that our school's mission is widely known and endorsed, and again, that's an excellent response or a very good response. Like, that's a very, very high mark. 96% of our parent community felt like our educational offerings were innovative, and then 98% felt like school spirit is positive, is evident, that there's a very strong sense of positive community culture here. And I hope that that's what you're experiencing as well. That was really nice to pull from our survey. In our 2022 survey, I'm moving on my slide, sorry. I wanted to pull a couple of things where we did see growth from our 2022 survey as compared to our 2023 survey. We recognized in our 2022 survey that really only 41% of our parent community members felt like the students that needed specific academic support were getting those needs met. So in 2022, we identified that as an area to provide additional support. We've grown to 59% in the most recent survey. And that number is actually more in keeping with the independent school benchmark across the board. So even though that number is still a little low, we'll see another number like that in just a second, it's actually on point more broadly for our peer schools, just because of independent schools operating a little bit differently than public school systems as far as the way that student support and those accommodations work. We saw overall academic satisfaction grow from 86%, saying it was excellent or very good, to 93%. School security was another spot that we identified in 2022 for growth, and under the leadership of Mr. Seals and the board and all of the other people involved, we have seen that grow to 83%, feeling like the steps that we've taken have made our security response very good or excellent. And then finally, the overall quality of education in 2022 going from an 89% satisfaction to a 95% satisfaction. And I think that speaks to some of the pieces that we have already put in place. But there were opportunities for growth, and so we'll go to the next slide. In our most recent survey, there was the opportunity for not just the ratings, the percentage scores, but also narrative feedback. And some of the things that popped up for us in the narrative feedback and in the percentage scores were a want for more robust academic and PE programming, and really extracurricular offerings overall, especially in the performing arts and visual arts. I want to both improve the communication around and the execution of our service learning, and we've talked a lot about what exactly that looks like. And then a response to food services. Food services is one of those pieces that across the board in most independent schools, that score sits a little bit lower, and we admittedly did not set our food services up for the most success at the beginning of the school year, having them working out of kind of a construction zone as we finished our transition year. So we've seen a lot of growth even in that area just this year. But really our big takeaways from these snapshots are they've informed the path forward for the strategic plan. We recognize that now is a great time to examine our current athletic and PE programming. Where do we need to tighten things up? Where do we need to reevaluate what our students are telling us they want to be doing during those times? The same with our extracurriculars, and then that community service piece. Is there a communication piece that we can tighten up there so that the community has a better understanding of the way students are a part of this Midtown community? Those are all things that you're going to hear a little bit more about as we get into the strategic plan that grew out of this feedback. So I will actually turn it back over to Mr. Myler, but also if you have any questions or anything that I can expand on, I can do that on Mr. Myler.
No one ask any questions about the survey?
You previously showed the growth from 2000 to 2003, so obviously we were focusing on some of those things. Did you see anything like decrease from 2000?
You know, that's a really good question, and honestly, no. We saw some stuff stay steady, but there was nowhere that we saw a significant decrease. Some of the places that we've identified this survey and the 2023 survey were places that continued to be stagnant from that 22 survey, which is why we identified them as new spots for growth. So, and again, that was a piece that felt really positive coming out of that survey.
So just to reiterate that, I think that one of the things we looked at was that the areas that had popped for focus re-popped, in some ways even more intensely. So we've had this trend of looking at this data from Isaacs really for the last 2 years. So we actually do this survey more than we have to. So typically schools only get it once every 7 years. We've been doing it way more frequently than that. The other ways that we get feedback, y'all may or may not know that every faculty and staff member gets to evaluate me every year. So just got done doing that. And it's good feedback. There's a lot of narrative feedback. In that narrative feedback, there's also where things may bubble up, where they just kind of like, you know, it may not be about me, it may be about like food, or maybe about something else. But we look for themes there. And the board looks at that too. The other thing that we look at is, you know, just what are we hearing from the faculty? So Ms. Ed talked a lot about what we saw in the parent feedback. That faculty also has really intensive feedback in these surveys. And so they may actually disagree with parents on what the issues are, which would not be surprising. So we look at that too and then talk to them and go from there. The other thing, and this is really, the strategic plan falls under the responsibility of the board. So even though administratively we get all this information, ultimately the board is the one that approves the strategic direction for the school. Their other main responsibility is fiduciary. So they are the fiduciary of the schools, and they're responsible for making sure that we are good stewards of the finances. We, as I mentioned before, I may not have mentioned it, we actually get audited every year. Our accreditation group doesn't require that. Probably a good practice to get audited every year. Probably not in personal life, I don't want to get audited every year, but the school is audited every year. And that's kind of how we get feedback. So this process, we took all this information that we heard from faculty, some of it's anecdotal as well, to be fair. We went through it at the board in the fall and talked about it and put together a template and a framework and got their feedback, adjusted it again, and then coming out of the break, I went back out to the faculty and staff and had some small groups and we talked about it. Make sure that what we were hearing was what they had said. So really driven by y'all's feedback, parent feedback, the board's feedback, and then our views internally. So these are the 5 big areas that we're going to look at. So one of our values is community, and I think you all know that. I think it's something that we do really well. I think our community is an advantage for us, our families, our teachers. That's the key. And so that's an area that we're going to talk about and what that means. I'll give a few examples as we get into the slides and what actually the vision is. Faculty support and well-being, as you may or may not know, it's becoming challenging and more challenging on faculty and staff in all schools. We've actually been really lucky in the sense that our turnover is not that high. It's only for our community, sometimes it may feel that way. We have 67 full-time equivalents, so 4 people leave, it feels like a lot. That's not a lot. We would like for it to be 2 every year, and sometimes it is. Sometimes that's organic growth, sometimes it's adding positions, but we want to make sure that we are making this the best place to be a teacher in Kansas City. It's kind of a cynical way of saying it, but what we'll say is like, if you're going to teach, why don't you teach in St. Paul? This is the place to do it. So if you're choosing to live this life, this is a good place to do it. So that's one of the areas that we talked about and making sure we're staying ahead of it. Student support and skills development, for me, this kind of goes back to our mission. We're trying to develop the whole child. We've always been a whole child school. We went back talking about life skills, our chapel program. So we want to make sure that we're supporting the students and finding the supports that they need, and then really helping them develop skills beyond the classroom and what that looks like and how we do it. It's something that's a constant work in progress. We also talked a lot about campus upgrades. I'll revisit this in a few minutes and give you an idea of what's coming for the campus. And then obviously the other big thing that we're here to do is something that all schools do well. I should say all Episcopal schools typically do well, is the teaching and learning piece. So we are constantly looking at what we're doing there and seeing how we can improve. So these are the 5 areas, and what we're going to do now is just kind of go through each one of them and talk a little bit about more what it actually means. What you'll see, like in this one, and I'm going to let Sophie come up and talk about it. So the 3 bullets, those are action steps, the things we're going to do. How this works for us over time is if we accomplish an action step and kind of mark it off, internally we'll say, hey, is there more to do here? We want to move on from this topic. So these won't be the only 3. These are kind of our starting place. The other thing that'll happen is ISACs, when we get our accreditation review report back, they get what's called recommendations and commendations. So some of the major recommendations, they also drive some changes to this. And we are actually expected to answer their major recommendations. All right.
Andrew already talked a little bit about kind of community connection, but we've identified 3 really important pieces of that as we make that cornerstone of the strategic plan. First and foremost is honoring and communicating about our Episcopal identity and how essential it is to the way that we do things here at St. Paul's. The Episcopal identity is a piece that undergirds so many aspects of what we're doing here, from, like Andrew said, the whole child education, our commitment to character development, our commitment to service learning, our commitment to fostering relationships. And so that idea of being a welcoming, inclusive place that is really focused on the whole child is a piece that we can continue to communicate out and communicate about and make sure it's kind of woven through all of these other pieces that we're focusing on, the service learning, the relationship growth. We also wanted to really focus on our partnership with parents. And some of this, hopefully, you've already seen and encountered firsthand this year. Things like the Lunch and Learns that that Mr. Patel offered this year were brought to us specifically by parents. These are things we're concerned about. These are things that we need to partner with the school on to respond to. So student devices, social media, how to equip our students to resolve conflict and support them as they develop those skills. Those are times where we're partnering with parents to make sure that a student's getting wraparound support and conversations when it comes to those really important developmental milestones. Additionally, we've introduced playbooks that are transitional publication pieces or publication pieces for transitional grades. I can speak specifically about the middle school playbook that we introduced for rising 6th graders this year. And that's a publication piece that talks not just about what it's like to be a 6th grader at St. Paul's, but specifically what sort of things is a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old experiencing as they're transitioning into these preteen years. And how are we working together? What are we doing in school? And what can you do at home so that we're all doing the same thing, working together to make sure the student is seen and supported and getting consistent messaging around some of those pieces. Those are pieces that we're looking to expand as well. And then finally, improving our outreach to alum and alumni families. And our development office has already started that this year as well, through different events, opportunities at the auction, and things like that. So, yeah. I believe the next part of our strategic plan is student support.
Right. So, focusing on supporting students with academic and social emotional pieces has always been something we do really well here at St. Paul's. It is important to focus on the whole child. We know we've been doing a tremendous amount of work and have made a lot of progress in this area, but we know it's critical for student success and for faculty to be able to do their best job with our students, so we need to continue to focus on these areas. Ms. Code mentioned the Isaacs data, and I specifically, since I was talking about this piece, took a deeper look at social emotional learning, counseling, and academic supports. And referring back to that reference she made about being rated as excellent or very good, 79% of our parents rated our SEL program as excellent or very good, 74% of our faculty, and 49% of our students. With counseling, 78% of our parents reported it as excellent or very good, 64% of our faculty, and 53% of our students. And then academic services, 59% of our parents reported it as excellent or very good, 37% of our faculty, and 62% of our students. So that's all within the benchmark of independent schools. We know we've made a lot of progress, both with staffing and programming, and we want to continue to do so. So historically, we've had 2 counselors and 2 learning specialists. Next year, we will transition to 3 counselors and 3 academic support personnel. So we'll have our ECC counselor, we'll have Mr. Patel working with 1st through 4th grade students and teachers and families, and Ms. Frisbee working with 5th through 8th grade students and families. These counselors will continue to push into the classroom and teach lessons, such as Sunshine Circle, Second Steps, and the Social Institute. But they'll also take over programming that our teachers are teaching. So these are things we're already doing, but they will take that off of the plate of the teachers so the teachers can focus on academic content. They'll also continue to support students one-on-one and in small groups. And this model of dividing them by 1st through 4th grade and 5th through 8th grade aligns with the schedule and will allow them to be more present in the life of the students in house activities and anchor trips and things of that nature. This specific year, we went from a part-time ECC counselor to a full-time counselor, and I think the difference it has made for our students and our faculty has been tremendous. One of our ECC teachers, Devin Hickey, she mentioned, this is what she said when I asked her about it. She said, having a full-time counselor in the ECC has made a significant impact on the emotional health of not only our students, but on our teachers as well. The consistent support and vital resources that this position in particular provides has directly addressed an ongoing need for social and emotional skill building in the ECC student community. More importantly, the counselor herself has nurtured and encouraged greater emotional awareness within our school through her unique and very special ability to connect and empathize, creating a wave of positive change in the relationships among peers, classrooms, families, and coworkers. That's just a part of her quote. I didn't read the whole thing to you, but you can tell that this staffing makes a big change and a big impact on our students and our teachers. Another piece of this is the learning support team. So we will have Ms. Pink will continue as a K-2 reading specialist. This is Julie Nolan, who's worked for the past 19 years in Lee Summit, helping students with various learning needs, will be our 1st through 4th grade learning specialist. And then we're in the final stages of the hiring process for our 5th through 8th grade learning specialist. The learning support team will support students' development by working one-on-one with them, working with small groups of students, pushing in and assisting teachers to help those students master the skill in real time, and then partnering with parents to help students with learning differences gain the skills they need to be successful and to learn to advocate for themselves. And then also supporting teachers. There are a wide variety of needs within a classroom, and having another professional who supports students academically is a huge support for teachers. So those are the pieces up at the top. I also want to talk a little bit about life skills and service learning. Part of our Episcopal identity is supporting, hang on just one second here. I apologize. Oh, sorry, that was just bullet point 1. I'm sorry, so wordy. All right, second bullet point there, focusing on our arts and athletics. So we do want to continue to focus on those areas. These are important for our students and our parents. We know we've made some progress, but we still have work to do. We've had a couple of effective funded needs where we've been able to refresh uniforms in our gym. We've hosted several successful spirit nights. We've stepped up our spirit wear game. But we know we also need to improve communication regarding athletics, and we want to review partnerships for visual and performing arts and athletic and PE programming. One great example of this is Kelly Pearson. This summer has partnered with KU as well as UMKC to provide some phenomenal athletic summer camps. We know that that can happen during the school year as well, so we want to continue to do that. Other opportunities include Kansas City Young Audiences and the Coterie. We've seen this work well in the past, and we know that there are lots of options and resources out there. And then finally, service learning and life skills. We have a couple of grade levels that are doing this really well. We'd like to replicate that in every grade level. So that might require a couple new partnerships, finding organizations that can really support the active involvement we would like our students to have. We'd also like to bring back our service learning requirement at the middle school level, and perhaps even host a community service fair so people know about opportunities that are connected to their passion areas. So those are ways we hope to continue to focus on the whole child at St. Paul's. Do you have any questions before I hand it over to the next person? Okay, I'm going to hand it over.
Good morning. It is really easy to brag about our teachers. So I think maybe I got an easy slide because I'm going to talk about the need to support our faculty, their well-being, and their growth as well. So I was talking to a new parent who enrolled their kiddo for next year a few weeks ago, and they shared with me that the biggest differentiator with St. Paul's versus the other schools they saw was how joyful and engaged the teachers were when they toured the school. So I think that speaks volumes. Katie and I actually hear that a lot through the admissions process as we admit kiddos into the ECC. We want to make sure that we keep that going. One of the best parts of my job is being able to go in and out of the classrooms every day, see the relationship that the teachers build, the skills that they build with the students, and how they collaborate with the parents, with you all too. And for that reason, we know that retaining our current teachers and hiring excellent teachers into our faculty is a priority for us. So like Andrew said earlier, our goal is to continue to be the best place to teach in Kansas City. I know he made the comment, if you're going to teach here, but I think that's true. Our teachers are really passionate about the field, and they love teaching here. And we hear that anecdotally and in survey work too. Okay, so 3 important action steps as we work to continue to support our faculty and retain them. The first has to do with academic and counseling support. Lisa just spoke in detail about what that actually means for the students. This is actually a survey area that tends to be a little lower than our other areas when we survey faculty. So Lucy showed earlier the survey results from the whole community as far as supporting students with special needs. Our faculty in the last survey, only 6.1% ranked this as excellent, that very top mark, and the benchmark for Isaac Schools is 15.8%. It is unusual. We're almost always above benchmark or at benchmark, so that is an outlier for us and definitely something that we have been working and want to continue to work to address. So as Lisa said, next year's model, specifically with academic support, is to continue to have a K-2 reading specialist and enroll the 1st through 5th and the 6th through 8th in academic support person as well. So these people work with teachers to identify areas of needs for students, set goals and an action plan for them, collaborate with parents, and then to reevaluate with the goal being to hopefully roll off support eventually as they build their skills. Counseling is the other part of that. I can't speak enough. I know Mrs. Hickey's quote really said it all, but I can't speak enough for what a difference it has made to having a full-time counselor in the ECC. It's tangible, and it's also pretty measurable with the goals that we set for students throughout the year and how many of them have met those goals and then set bigger ones too. The students are growing a great deal. We know that this works, so we're excited about next year's model. I think an important part to mention here too, besides the number of students who are already working with our counselor, is how many students actually roll off that support. We have students in every grade level in ECC who started out receiving either one-on-one or small group support with the counselor, but have also rolled off of that because they've met their goals, and that is what we want. We want our students we want to be able to identify areas that need improvement, meet those areas, and then continue on through the grades. I can speak, of course I can speak from the early childhood point of view, where if you start working on that really early, the students are going to just succeed more and more as they get older. Okay, so that's the first action step for supporting our faculty. The second action step involves professional development. And making sure that that's faculty driven. So you may or may not know, historically, St. Paul's has done an excellent job of prioritizing professional development in the budget. In the work that we do, it's really important to us that our teachers are growing professionally, but also personally as well. But what our teachers have reported, anecdotally in the narratives and surveys, is that they want really specific, actionable PD that they can take back directly and implement it into their classrooms. The school has done a great job in the past few years of carrying out programs with fruition, such as project-based learning and Ruler, and a lot of that involves whole school professional development. We're going to work to continue and perfect those programs that we already have in place, but we also want to provide individual, grade level, and divisional professional development based on what the teachers say they need. An example of that is Mrs. Finlove and I were hearing in team meetings early this year that the teachers were really looking, in early childhood, were looking for ways to heighten students' gross and fine motor skills in the classroom. So we collaborated with Terry Tankle. She was able to come in and do a divisional training on reflex integration and sensory needs, and I can see those things being practiced every day in the classroom. So that's the kind of thing that we're focusing on in the future for professional development. The third action step in this area is kind of a no-brainer, but we know how important salary, benefits, and quality of life are for teachers. So we regularly, annually benchmark our teacher salaries with competitors with the goal of staying competitive. We would not want that to be a reason that a teacher would go somewhere else. We also have a strong benefits program, as you probably know, whether it is health insurance benefits or faculty remission or our retirement program is better than most independent schools as well. So we want to continue those. We want to continue to evaluate salary and benefits and make sure that we stay competitive in the market as other schools shift too. I will also tell you, just behind the scenes, we work really hard and we want to prioritize making the quality of life for teachers really strong. We've done a lot of schedule work under the leadership of Mrs. Hode in the past few years, and part of that was evaluating plan time for every grade level to make sure that our teachers had time to grow professionally, but also to reach that high bar that they set for themselves, and that's important. Another example is it could be just really important for us to get coffee for the teachers. So we really work hard to improve the quality of life in a lot of ways, some of them more tangible than others. Does anyone have any questions about moving forward with supporting our faculty? All right. I will turn it over. And I will kind of stay up there too, because we're going to talk about the master plan.
All right, so we're currently in the process of working with Multi-Studio, formerly Gould Evans. It's our architect partner, has been for about 8 years. We're putting together an updated campus master plan. We're currently waiting on some numbers for the plan, so we've looked at some different areas of the school. These are the 3 areas that are going to be prioritized in this next round. So we're looking at the upper field. So if you turn your head to the right, you can see probably line out there. We're looking at, we kind of combined Walnut Street, and y'all heard me talk about that probably ad nauseum at this point. So that's a major area of focus. The ECC, so that space is technically our newest space, but with all the work we've done to refresh things, it's kind of becoming Getting to the point where we need to refresh some areas there, we've been talking to the teachers about what they want, and then finally we're talking about adding support. We say academic support areas. Some of that would be for academic support, some would be meeting spaces. We have bathrooms kind of in shower facilities in the gym that's not their purpose or point. So we have the ability to recapture some space over in the south building, and that would help us have more breakout spaces. Anytime we add breakout spaces, they're used. So we've seen that in the last few years, and it continues to grow. So that's what we're doing. If you look at this, you can kind of see, and we'll do a bigger presentation on the master plan when it comes together, but we've got big plans for the field and for different things out there. What we're doing right now is waiting on the numbers, and then Michelle Rodriguez and our development director are talking to some outside consultants about the best way to approach this. So a lot of this ultimately will depend on money. That's just the way it works. And we'll sit down with them and then talk about scope and sequence. The way we've been successful here with all these projects is to kind of chunk them. So I imagine we'll do something similar here. So we'll sit down and prioritize and say, hey, this amount, we can do the building the bathroom, year 1, year 2 can be this. So I imagine that's the pathway we'll take. Again, with these projects, we've heard from the community about the field. Obviously, Walnut Street is a passion area. This picture you see below the kind of master plan overview, that's going to be this year's fund division, so we're going to communicate more about that. But our goal ultimately is to be able to close Walnut from 9 to 2:30 every day. Still working on it. I have another meeting tomorrow about this. Regardless of that, we also want to improve the safety and just look at the look of Walnut Street. Part of that is trying to 360 the campus, so if you're coming on the campus on Walnut, you're at a school. It's not always obvious to folks. So some of it's signage, some of it's these tables, these speed tables, and flashing lights, and some of it will just be, if we can close it, great, and then we're also looking at the entrance down where people come into the middle school. That currently is a dumpster area. So, but that's the idea. We feel like for fund division, this is a good scope. It'll help us really kind of build the connectivity as we look at we'll talk about this. See, want to be mindful of our time too.
So another part of this master campus refresh is an early childhood refresh. So clearly the early childhood center is getting to be where some of the tile and paint colors are pretty outdated. So aesthetics is one thing. When we surveyed the teachers about this, their priorities are twofold. One, we have a sound problem down there. I'm sure you've noticed if you've ever been in the classrooms. The way that the classrooms were designed is great and collaborative, and in some ways it works really well for our program, but it can be really difficult for all students, especially those who have sensory needs, because it's really loud in the classroom. If you're in one classroom and the teacher is teaching a lesson in the other, it's very difficult with the connectivity of them. So one of the main goals in doing a refresh of the early childhood center is to reduce the sound level and create better acoustics in the classroom, so we can reach more kids and be more effective in our teaching too. The other big goal that the teachers identified was creating a space that matches our current program and our programmatic goals. So a few examples of that: one is we've grown to have 4 preschool classrooms instead of 3, so we turned a music room into a classroom, and it really works. So we would like to look at our current numbers and our current programming and make sure that the space matches that. We have some unused space too. We have a 4th kindergarten classroom that doesn't have a class in there, so we just want to make sure with our very small footprint here in Midtown, we're maximizing the use of those spaces. Moving on to the academic support areas, like Andrew mentioned, the way we use locker rooms in 2024 is very different than when that building was built. So we have some underutilized space in the other section, and as we talked about a lot with the refresh last summer of this space, we can always use more areas for student support and student enrichment, working one-on-one in small groups with students. So that's the goal, is to create some spaces for students and also the faculty that work with those students in that area too. Do you guys have any questions about upgrading campus spaces? Okay. All right, I'm going to pass it on to Lisa again to talk about teaching and learning.
All right, and I'm going to be very quick this time. Of course, as an Episcopal school and an independent school, we want to focus on teaching and learning as one of our priority strategic areas. We know that we have really good academics and we have incredible faculty who work diligently to ensure that this is a great experience for our students. There are 3 specific ways we're going to keep growing in this area. First and foremost is research and data. So we're going to continue to research and identify a high-quality program, find schools that are implementing those programs really well, and then provide the essential PD for us to do the exact same thing. We also want to continue to use data wisely. We collect a lot of data. So there's daily information that the teachers are collecting, formative data throughout the units, end of chapter unit assessments, and then we also do some more bigger picture data for individual students and for the whole school. So on the left there you see the beautiful reading growth of an 8th grade student from 2nd grade through 8th grade. Prior to this, Ms. Pink was assessing them with a different tool, but you can see that nice growth that we're going for. So we do that for all of our students to make sure they're growing just like we would like them to do. In addition to that, over here you see some data from our formal standardized testing program. We use Educational Records Bureau and have really thorough standardized testing data at the end of the year. We get that back in June, but throughout the year, a couple of years ago, this manufacturer also came up with a different product that you can use throughout the school year to get a quick snapshot of how a student is growing and how your class is doing. So this is data. We do that twice a year at every grade level, 3rd through 8th grade, and then meet with teachers after we collect that data to make sure our instruction is reflecting students' needs. We do realize there's more opportunities to collect and analyze data. For example, this year, during our 1 o'clock dismissal days and PD days, we had 6 faculty and staff members trained. 3 of them focused on collecting granular data for reading success, and 3 focused on collecting data to assess students' strengths and challenges in the area of math and how to track their math growth as students throughout their time at St. Paul's. So that's our first bullet point up there. We also want to continue to systematically review our curriculum. Lucy's going to talk to you in a second about the Isaacs report we write. We'd like to do a mini version of this with each content area on a cycle. So we'll take one specific content area, zoom really deeply into that, analyze everything we're doing, get all the teachers who teach that K through 8th, and then talk about what's going well, what we'd like to improve on, gaps, redundancies, our resources, and then differently than we've done historically, bring in some outside eyes, people who might teach that in other independent schools or experts on that content area and say, hey, we agree you're doing these things well, we agree, here's something we're wondering about, if you could tweak or modify this. Our last area here is we want to continue to look for ways to innovate our program. This is where that research comes back in, finding the right programs, putting the right resources in place so that we have the maximum impact on students. One quick example, we did this with social studies over the summer of 2022. This summer we're sending a vertically aligned team of social studies teachers to a world conference that focuses on using project-based learning in the social studies curriculum. So those are ways we're continuing to focus on teaching and learning at St. Paul's. Are there any questions about those pieces? Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Hogan.
This one might be Andrew.
We have 2 minutes.
We're going to go fast.
I just kind of wanted to point out that we've been moving on this already, so this is the first time y'all are hearing it, but once we identified the areas and got affirmation that these were the areas we were going to look at, we started putting the gas pedal down. So as they mentioned, we are adding additional support for academic and counseling based on the feedback. The master plan will be done this summer, we'll have those numbers. We're also talking to capital campaign consultants, that's in process right now. We're also going to do a faculty survey. I can get here a lot of data collection. This one is specifically just for faculty and has sections like, what do you want to benefits? Like, it's much more about their day-to-day experience and capturing more of the intangible stuff, as opposed to just like, how do you feel about academics, this and that, just really how they're feeling just in general about the school and how their experience is here. So we're looking forward to that. We just had an alumni event, as they mentioned. We're also going to reach back out to y'all and get some more information about what you want. So like when the parents go ask, and it was a great thing for these lunch and learns, we'll be asking what other topics do you want to hear about, and maybe find better ways to inform them when the parents get on to make those kind of bundled experiences. So we come to the meeting, make this a learning topic. And then finally, just kind of looking at other areas. So what happens in the summer around here is this group still works, not the whole summer, but we will sit down in June and really dig into all of this again and kind of do a SWOT analysis and figure out what we need to do for next year. So the planning for next year really has started a long time ago. All right, Isaacs, we're going to be quick, I promise.
There really isn't, yeah, there's not a ton to share that we haven't already talked about. This is certainly not unrelated to everything that we've talked about. It kind of runs parallel to the work that we're doing. Our strategic plan is something that we do for our own growth, but also because it's an important part of our accreditation cycle. Right now, we're in the process of our self-study process. So we're actually 2, and if you remember from earlier, because of the COVID adjustment, really like 3 years in. We have gotten together as a faculty and written a comprehensive document that goes over our academic programming, our extracurricular programming, all of the facilities pieces, everything that makes the school run, and provided extensive narrative feedback about what we're doing. We'll turn that over to a visiting team in October. The great thing about the visiting team is it's made up of our peers. These are teachers and administrators from other Isaac schools that know how independent schools work, they know what to look for, and most importantly, they know what the best practices are, the standards of membership that come from Isaacs are that we should be adhering to. And those are standards of practice that monitor or provide a benchmark, not just for curriculum, not just for scope and sequence and things like that, but things like our emergency response, our auditing and financial reporting, our transparency around different school procedures and things like that. So there's a whole checklist that they'll go through at the end of their visit to just ensure that we are doing all the things that we need to be doing to continue to be a great school, and then also offering some areas for further reflection. I am really confident it's going to be a great visit. As we mentioned, we had some visitors on campus last week who just wanted to come and see how the school worked. They had a great time. They're incredibly complimentary of all of the people that they encountered, and I anticipate that our visit in October will be much the same.
We'll share more information about that in the fall. It'll be obvious when they're here. So I think some of y'all know, like my dad was in the FDIC for like 35 years. It's not like that at all. They don't come in with their briefcases. It's really meant to be a growth opportunity for everyone. And, it's kind of a daunting process, but Miss O and I just did one in Detroit. And you learn a lot, and it's a good thing. Like I said, it may result in some changes in what we are talking about doing strategically. New things emerge. All right, so we will call time there. I'm going to stick around if anybody has any questions. If they didn't want to ask in a big group, I'm here, and we can talk some more about anything that you want to talk about. Thank you for coming.